Today's visual novel is Hoshizora no Memoria. Hoshizora no Memoria stars Kogasaka Yu, and the tale begins with a flashback of him and his childhood friend. It's clear they both have strong feelings for one another, but unfortunately, Yu has to move away and is out of contact with her for quite some time. Eventually, Yu moves back to the town with hopes of meeting up with her again. However, at the same place he used to always meet his childhood friend, he encounters a girl by the name of Mare. It just so happens that this girl is not human at all, and is actually a Shinigami, or god of death, whose specialty lies in reaping nightmares. What this involves isn't necessarily clear at first, but she actually performs this act on Yu shortly after meeting him. This causes him to forget the name of his childhood friend, which makes finding her far more difficult. While he is frustrated with Mare for performing this action on him, their relationship doesn't necessarily immediately go sour. Thankfully, our main character is a fairly understanding individual, and while he doesn't know why Mare performs these acts, he decides to gradually get to know her and understand her purpose a bit more. On the other side of things, Yu also joins the school astronomy club after being invited by a girl named Asaho, because the club was struggling to gain members. Thus begins Yu's life in the town of his childhood, as he tries to remember the lost memory of his childhood friend, engage in club life, and discover the true motivations of Mare. If it's not obvious, this visual novel is another club-oriented karage. However, to make things different than, say, If My Heart Had Wings or Kira Kira, there's also plenty of supernatural phenomenon in it as well, and it doesn't just apply to Mare. I won't spoil more than that though, but just expect a decent amount of it throughout the tale. The tone is rather lighthearted all around, as expected of the genre. However, it does get oddly dark and serious depending on which route you choose to undertake. Don't worry, it doesn't ever get too grim, but it's certainly willing to go places that other karages usually don't go. Also, you're of course going to be treated to a hefty amount of comedy with varying levels of effectiveness as per the norm. A lot of it is quite funny, but sometimes it's repeated just a touch too often. For example, the president of the astronomy club will cry, "Shit!" every time he gets overly worked up over something, in which case, someone gives him some sort of puzzle to play around with to calm him down. The first few times I laughed, but then it got a tad too old. Such is the case with most of the comedy, such as when his buddy, his bro friend, gets his camera broken all the time, and he goes, "Eyeball!" It's so funny though, the first few times, but they just do it too often. This is probably due to mainly the common route overstaying its welcome, but thankfully, the heroine routes never felt like that, so I wouldn't say the pacing of the game is necessarily weak. Story-wise, the game is actually fairly strong for the most part. The prologue in particular did a very good job of hooking me onto the game right away. It's only a shame the pacing slowed down considerably afterwards once Yu starts to join the astronomy club activities. Still, it does a good job of showing the character's passions towards things like stargazing, while keeping everything relatively simple to understand for the audience. Much in the same way Sora no Mani Mani did it. It's an older anime that you might want to check out if you like this game. Once the individual character routes start, they are varying levels of strengths, but Komomo's in particular is wonderfully written with great build-up and subtle foreshadowing all around. However, even the weakest route, which I would say is Chinami's, is certainly not bad, and characters usually come across fairly believable the whole way through, if a tad too simple. The only problem with the story and the writing at times is when the game is trying to be dramatic in certain places. Rather than compelling and, say, tense, I have to say it comes across as cheesy. Not always, of course, but for some reason I felt like the writing suffered considerably in these sections. I think he didn't want things to come across as overly serious, but it just felt odd whenever these sections happened. However, during the more relaxed moments, such as when Yu is conversing with Mare, is when the game really shines. Which is a good thing, because for the most part, a karage is going to be relaxing, so it's good that the relaxing moments are the best parts, if you ask me. Character-wise, it's hard to really say much. Yu is certainly better than your average character protagonist because he's very understanding, but still kind of funny in a subtle kind of way, and he has just enough personality, though I do think he might needed just a touch more to stand out, but he's not a bad character at all, and characters like Komomo, Kosame, Mare, and even the side characters are also quite likable and well done. But this game also has two heroines that most people seem to not care for, and that's Isuzu and Chinami. Chinami is annoying to people mainly because she's so genki to an obnoxious degree, so energetic to an obnoxious degree, much in the same way Makina from Grisaya was. She'll always cry, "Oni-chan, Oni-chan, Oni-chan," numerous things to top things off, and this just bugs the hell out of people. Personally, I thought she was kind of funny at first, but then I kind of saw where people were coming from. She didn't necessarily bother me too much, but I will say that her route not being that great either, okay, but not great, probably was the icing on the cake for that. Isuzu is much like Yumiko from Grisaia, except to a much heavier degree. She's overly pessimistic and negative due to reasons you're not necessarily shown right away, and while Shinami I was okay with, Isuzu was simply way too much for me. Isuzu is shown on the rooftop basically looking at stars through her telescope, and they try to get her to join the astronomy club, but she's just so against it, and she's so against basically being friends with Shinami as well, and Shinami's just trying to be friends with her, which is why I don't mind Shinami. I think Shinami, she has her good points of, trying to be friends, and just Isuzu, I think, it's good that she has negative traits, because if you have too many positive traits, a character can be boring, right? But I think Isuzu just has too many negative traits, and I don't think her positive traits really balance it out. For example, in Grisaia, Yumiko is my favorite character in Grisaia, and that's because I feel like out of all the characters, her negative and positive traits balance out the best, and I feel like she develops the most as well. Well, Isuzu, she is the kind of character that should develop the most, because, when you start a character at rock bottom in a character where they're just so negative all the time, it's just natural they would probably, if they're going to develop to be appealing at all, that they would have to get the most development. But unfortunately, I don't think Isuzu really got that. I think her development and her route came a little too late, and I still felt like her negativity or pessimistic traits were not too great, and there's a little other problems with her route as well, but I won't cover that here. Isuzu just did not work for me. So it might be difficult for a lot of people to enjoy the routes due to having too many annoying traits that don't necessarily get a leave during their routes. But there's plenty of people who like them as well, so I think this is really just going to vary from person to person. I expected to like Asuho, for example, the most due to being a redhead lover and just being biased, but her character did come across as a bit overly simple. Her personality is likable enough, of course, but I always felt she could use more depth. And her route also was just a touch too simple, especially compared to someone like Komomo's route. The rest of the heroines and characters thankfully make up for this and are quite compelling and likable in their own little ways. And it's another game where the bro characters, I just like to call them bro characters because that's what they are. You're surrounded by a harem of girls, and then you got the bro characters that are buddy with the main character, but sometimes they always come across as losers in a lot of Karages, and I don't like that. But thankfully that's not the case here. They just come across as really silly, and I'm always fine with that. Production-wise, it's mostly satisfying all around. The artwork is wonderfully cute and colorful and bright, which complements the tone well, and the music, while not really anything super fantastic, does contain enough variety and is certainly better than your average Karage soundtrack. Well, the emotional tracks are good, but there's a few too many bland filler tracks, I guess you could say. Overall, Hoshizora no Memoria is one of the stronger translated Karages for sure, thanks to its nice lighthearted atmosphere, decent pacing, and for the most part, well done characterization and writing. And also the best part of this game is that it delivers its emotional messages fairly well without beating you over the head with them a lot of the time, so I think it does a good job there too. However, it is held back due to the heroines not getting quite as much development as necessary, and the common route stretching out a bit longer than needed. So perhaps for this game, I would recommend just playing your favorite heroine and downloading a save to read the true ending if you so desire. Because there is a true ending, and I still like Komomo's route more than that, but a lot of people like the true ending the most, so it just varies from person to person, like say. It's a decent ending, of course. All the endings are basically, I would say, decent, and even though Komomo's route is my favorite route, I think it had probably the weakest ending, if that makes any sense. Not like it's horrific, but it's just not the ending I kind of care for. I don't want to spoil why, but I'll just let you know that. And that's the end of this review. I'm sorry, this one's also been a one I've played so long ago that I would not be fair reviewing all the character routes. I know the basics of the game, I know where this game did well and where it did weak, but I can't give you an in-depth overview and thought process of during all the character routes like I said before. Sorry about that, we'll eventually get to ones that I've played more recently where, I can give you the in-depth stuff. If anyone even cares about that, I know some of you do, but I don't know how many really do. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.